Hey, Difference Makers podcast family. I'm your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and you are in for a treat. We're going to give you an episode that's going to be hosted by the one and only Matt Osborne. You may say, Matt Osborne, that's kind of familiar. Well, if you'll remember, if you've been listening to us for a while, he was a guest on our show a while back, and this was before he joined us. Now he's the head of all consumer protection at our law firm, and he is killing it, making such a difference in the lives of people. You're going to want to hear his message. I'm keeping it under wraps what he's going to talk about, but you are going to love it. So can't wait for you to hear Matt and what he's going to tell you about consumer protection, all the cool things that go along with it. And I can't also wait to get back to be with you again. So until next time, keep making a difference.
Thanks, Dr. Hoven. I'm here to talk to you about all things consumer law. So I often get questions, what is consumer law? Well, it's pretty broad. It encompasses a lot of different things, but probably one of the most common complaints that we get is false credit reporting, which can also be broad. Most people don't know there's hundreds of different credit bureaus. So most people are familiar with the big three credit bureaus like Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. But what a lot of people don't know is there's hundreds of specialty credit reporting companies that, for example, there's credit reporting companies that all they do is sell credit reports to employers about background checks when you're, trying to get a new job or you're trying to get a new position at your job. There's credit bureaus that all they do is report utilities like cell phones, cable bills, things like that. There's credit bureaus that all they do is report subprime auto loans and payday loans. And so a lot of people don't even know about these entities. But, there's a lot of different types of false credit reporting out there. There's a lot of identity theft victims where people's identity gets stolen and the bank or the whatever creditor doesn't want to believe them. There is something called a mixed file, and that's where they take two different people's information and they combine them into one file. It's very common with people that have common names like John Smith. A lot of times they'll just take multiple John Smiths and merge them into one file. It can also be common for people that have close social security numbers. A lot of the credit bureaus have what I call loose matching algorithms, meaning that they only require an 8-for-9 social match. So if you have one person that, let's say their social ends in 2323, and another person, their social ends in 2324. So they have an 8-for-9 social match. A lot of times the bureaus will mix those people up, especially if they've ever lived in the same state at any point in time. There's also what I call false status cases. So that's just where you paid your mortgage on time, but you're being reported as late, or you paid your credit card on time, but you're being reported as late. That's a big problem. There's also problems with continuing to report debts that have been discharged in bankruptcy. There's problems of, reporting debts that you've already paid as still due and outstanding. So we get all kinds of those calls. We also, a lot of complaints we get are on the background checks. So it's very, very common for people to be applying for jobs and get turned down because somebody else's felony appears on their report. We get complaints about, people are unable to get housing because they apply for an apartment and a credit report gets sold about them with somebody else's crimes on there. So that's pretty much the false credit reporting. We get a lot of bank fraud cases. And so what I mean by that is, your bank account gets hacked and somebody transfers money out of your checking account or out of your savings account, and it's fraudulent and you didn't authorize it, and then the bank won't believe you. So we get a lot of complaints about that. We get a lot of complaints about wrongful debt collection, being harassed by collection agencies, and that's that can be whether you owe the money or not. So even if you owe the money, you might be getting harassed. They might be calling you too many times or making false threats against you. And then we get a lot of complaints where people don't owe the money for whatever reason. So say they're an identity theft victim and now a collection agency is trying to sue them for that debt. Or say they already paid the bill years ago and now a collection agency is trying to take them to court for a debt that they don't owe. So we get those kind of complaints. Another complaint we're starting to see a lot of is bad faith insurance. So we get a lot of cases where, say, your roof is damaged by hail, and then the insurance company doesn't want to pay for it because they try to say, well, that's not hail damage, that's sun damage, or that's wear and tear. Lots of water leak cases where, people wake up one day and all of a sudden there's water damage all over their house. And the insurance company will try to deny it sometimes and say, oh, it's a long-term leak that you knew about, which is not true, but that's what they say to deny it. We're seeing cases where people's cars get wrecked in accidents and insurance companies try to take shortcuts and, deny coverage. So say the frame gets damaged. We're seeing cases where insurance companies are telling people, let our preferred shop fix it. And then what they do is they just fix the bumper and the outside and make it look nice and shiny, but they don't actually fix the frame or the structural damage, which now that car is unsafe to drive and, they're putting you and your family back in that car. We're also getting a lot of complaints lately about bed bugs. So we're seeing apartment complexes, retirement homes, hotels getting infested with bed bugs. We've seen complaints where entire properties are infested and the management doesn't want to do anything to fix it. And we're finding that they could very easily fix it if they did it the right way, but they don't want to exterminate them the right way. They want to do things to cut corners and save money. And so, we're getting lots of complaints about that. There's debt settlement scams is another common one where people, you see ads all the time that say, hey, if you're in a lot of debt, you got a lot of credit card debt, contact us, we can help you. And these companies, they tell people, okay, stop paying your creditors and just pay us. And then we're going to save up all the money in a trust account, and then we're going to try to settle your debts. And a lot of times what these companies do is they just take your money and then they leave you with a whole bunch of debt, and you're oftentimes even worse off than you were before because now your credit is tanked because you stopped paying based on their advice. And now you've got thousands and thousands of dollars in interest and other fees tacked onto the debt, and all the money that you paid to the debt settlement company is now gone. We also see foreclosure rescue scam cases. That's where oftentimes people who are vulnerable, they fall into foreclosure, and these scam artists go knock on their door. They say, hey, we see that you're in foreclosure. We can loan you, say, $30,000 to get you out of foreclosure. Would that be something you'd be interested in? And we can give you 2 years to pay it back. And people say, yeah, I'd be interested in that. And then these scam artists go in their house. They hang out with them for weeks, a couple hours a day, and build up the trust. And then they usually bring paperwork shortly before the sale saying that the person is selling them their house for $30,000. And they'll oftentimes use a lot of different tricks to get them to sign it. And then all of a sudden, people have unknowingly sold their house for $30,000 thinking that it was a loan. And then they, the scammers then try to throw them out on the streets and evict them and steal the house, basically. So that's in a nutshell, most of the Consumer Protection Act cases that we get complaints about. So yeah, these consumer protection laws are important because most of them have provisions in there where if you win, the other side has to pay your attorney's fees. And that's what allows us to take most of these cases on a contingency basis. And if you didn't have that, almost very, very few people would ever be able to bring these cases. And so they're important because they protect all of us as consumers, but especially those in our population who are the most vulnerable and who haven't had a voice in the legal system for many years. And so when companies break these types of laws, it can have a tremendous impact on your life. So we've seen people lose the jobs. Almost everybody has significant emotional distress. They have trouble sleeping. They have trouble eating. They have increased fights with their spouse or their partner. They have trouble concentrating at work. We've seen people's credit score drop by hundreds of points. We've seen people not be able to buy houses, not be able to rent apartments, not be able to get credit cards. And a lot of times the only way to ever get it fixed, especially in credit reporting, is you have to file a lawsuit. You can dispute it 5, 10, 20 times, and almost every time they're just going to keep responding that it's correct. And that's because they don't really do a real investigation. So these kinds of laws, and when companies violate these kinds of laws, it can have a tremendous impact on people's lives. Most people that this happens to, they don't even know that there's attorneys like me out there that can help them. So a lot of people just kind of take it on the chin and just move on and deal with it the best way that they can. So I don't have a specific statistic or number, but I can say that a lot of people don't even know that they have their rights or that there's attorneys like me that are out there to protect them. One of the areas we focus on a lot is called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that's a statute that requires that your credit reports be accurate. And so it applies to not only the credit bureaus, but it also applies to what's called the furnishers. That's the people that report the information to the credit bureaus. Under most circumstances, before you can file a lawsuit under the FCRA, you have to first do a dispute with the credit bureaus. And they're supposed to investigate your dispute. They're supposed to contact the data furnisher as well as part of the investigation. And what I find in real life, what happens is nobody does an investigation. So let's say you've got a credit bureau reporting somebody else's debt on your credit file. What happens more often than not is people do the dispute and the credit bureaus spend about 10 seconds on it. They just push a button. They don't do a real investigation. They forward an electronic message to the bank or the mortgage company, whoever's doing the false reporting. And then those people oftentimes also just spend about 30 seconds to a minute looking at irrelevant stuff that has nothing to do with your dispute. And then they just respond back and say, yes, it's correct. And then the credit bureaus just copy that and say, yes, it's correct. And then people get a letter from the credit bureaus saying, we verified it's correct, even though it's not. And this process oftentimes repeats itself multiple times. People sending in disputes and, it never gets fixed. And then when you file a lawsuit, then it magically gets fixed. And like I said, that's encompasses a lot of different scenarios, anything from somebody else's debts or accounts on your credit report to identity theft or somebody fraudulently taking over your credit card and making charges that you didn't authorize. That's also falls under fair credit reporting. It could also include somebody else's crimes on your background check or somebody else's crimes on your housing credit report. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it provides, if credit bureaus or furnishers violate it, you can get actual damages, you can get punitive damages, you can get your attorney's fees and costs if you win. Bad faith insurance. So if an insurance company, if they wrongfully deny your claim, now keep in mind, this has to be your own insurance company. So if you get into a car accident and the other driver's insurance company treats you unfairly, the laws are not as protective in that situation. But if it's your own insurance company, they owe you a lot more duties. And so if your own insurance company wrongfully denies your claim or they unreasonably delay your claim, you can get actual damages. You can get double damages. So for example, if they wrongfully denied a $20,000 water leak claim, you can get that. You can get double damages of an additional $40,000. You can get emotional distress. You can get attorney's fees and costs. So we're seeing a lot of insurance companies do that, both in auto claims, property damage like roofing claims, water leak claims, anything like that is oftentimes going to be bad faith. They're looking for reasons to deny claims in order to save the company money. Mixed file cases, that's a subtype of false credit reporting cases, but it's one of the most common problems out there. And that's where credit bureaus basically take information about two or more people and they merge them together. It's very, very common with, twins, people with common names. We see a lot of cases where, father and son, senior, junior situations, say John Smith Sr. and John Smith Jr., brothers and sisters that have similar names. A lot of times the credit bureaus will make their algorithms so loose that they'll just kind of merge them all together and just say, well, it's close enough because their socials are a 7 for 9 match or an 8 for 9 match, and both of their first names start with a T, or they both lived in Colorado at any point in their life. And that can be a huge problem for people, because not only will it affect your credit score can go way, way down for a variety of reasons. So if the other person has negative information like foreclosures, bankruptcies, late payments, your credit score will go way down. But even if the other person pays their debt on time, that can still make your credit score go down, because if they have a lot of debt, then that will make your debt to credit available ratio go way up. And the higher that is, then the lower your credit score will go down. It can also lead to other problems for people. They can be denied jobs, housing. They can be sued for other people's debts. So we see that happen quite often, where, John Smith is sued for a different John Smith's debt. And the collection agency sued our John Smith because they got his address from a credit report that was mixed with the other John Smith. And so now you've got to defend a bogus lawsuit by some collection agency who's trying to go after a different John Smith. And so we see that all the time as well. So please leave us a 5-star review. All of the links can be found in the caption along with our website. Thanks for watching.